Between games, literature, music, and even animation that has steadily been released over the past few decades, the Touhou Project is, without a doubt, absolutely massive. So it's understandable for people just getting their foot in the door to see that giant mass of content with little context, and backing off from the sheer time commitment needed to see if you would even enjoy it. But when someone does jump in, the overwhelming presence of the flashy, exciting fan content leaves the comparatively humble official works in its shadow, untouched by the majority of fans. And while the canon works might not appeal to everyone, I think it's worth listing them all out for those that might be overwhelmed. This is my beginner's guide to everything canon. So here's the big question. What is canon? The Touhou canon is any official work that Zun himself has made or gave explicit oversight in regards to its content. Likewise, anything he says in interviews or comments about the series can be considered fact. Everything else is not canon. This includes fan anime like Memories of Phantasm, mobile games like Lost Word, and even the plethora of fan games that have found their way on Steam or home consoles. And while these things are not considered canon, I do want to emphasize that there is nothing wrong with liking them. I simply wish to distinguish what is official versus fan work. I'll be listing out all the official works, their components, and a very brief overview of what to expect from them. I wish to avoid spoiling content to allow people to experience it for themselves. Also, while I cannot completely future-proof this video, I will mention an up-to-date list of all official Touhou works can always be found on the main page of the Touhou Wiki, which supports more than a dozen languages. I've left a link in the description. Now, of course, we have to start with the games, which is where everything began. The majority of these are shoot-'em-ups, which can be fairly difficult if you've never played one before. Besides those, there are several official fighting games and a side-scrolling action game. Most of these have several different routes and endings with a mostly ambiguous canon route. However, you can consider any and all information given in each of them as canon. Aside from what is present in the actual games, many of these have written prologues and occasionally an omake or an extra with some supplementary information. These are all considered canon. While you can play through the games to experience most of the content, if perhaps the games are too difficult, the wiki has the game dialogue, prologues, and extra content all translated with the original Japanese text side by side for comparison for every game. While I would encourage everyone to try the games for themselves, I would also say not to feel too discouraged if they don't appeal to you or simply are too hard. There's plenty more to the series than the games. I would personally recommend starting with either Touhou 6 for having the most recognizable characters for someone absolutely new to the series, one of the fighting games that seems more appealing, or Touhou 14 for a decently simple modern experience. You can start with Touhou 1 and work your way up like I did, but I would like to preface that the series had a soft reboot after Touhou 5, and thus most of the characters in the games don't appear again. I would personally recommend going back to them after going through some of the other examples. Next we have Zun's music collection. Now you may be wondering what music has to do with canon. Well, alongside these albums that Zun releases, there are short stories that have a loosely connected narrative featuring two college students in the real world. Translations of these stories can likewise be found in the previously mentioned wiki. The remaining canon content is all in written form. The first set of these is a series known as Touhou Bougetsushou, which is comprised of two manga series and a novella counterpart. These works form an interconnected storyline involving both Gensokyo and the Lunarians on the moon. It should be noted, however, that one of these manga series, Inaba of the Earth and Inaba of the Moon, is considered official, but the events are not considered canon as Zun was only loosely involved in its creation. The other two works, however, are both canon. These are Silent Sinner in Blue and Cajun the Lunatic Runegate. If you are interested in these, I would recommend reading them together. Touhou Sangetsusei is a manga series currently comprised of 4 separate parts: Eastern and Little Nature Deity, Strange and Bright Deity, Oriental Sacred Place, and Visionary Fairies and Shrine. All of these follow the adventures of a group of fairies within Gensokyo. While there is some space for a narrative, most of the series is episodic and focuses more on the world building using the fairies as a vehicle to explore Gensokyo. Curiosities of Lotus Asia is an ongoing series of side stories that focuses on a man named Renosuke, the owner of a curio shop within Gensokyo. Characters from the other official works often appear as customers each chapter. Readers are able to learn a fair bit about Gensokyo through both Renosuke's monologues and his discussions with guests. Touhou Wild and Horned Hermit is a completed manga series that focuses on the hermit Ibarakasen. Throughout the story and episodic plots, Kasen's thoughts, beliefs, and role in Gensokyo at large are explored up to its conclusion. I would say that this is a decent starting point of getting into the series if you are interested in reading manga. Touhou Forbidden Scrollery is a completed manga series that focuses on a regular human girl named Motori Kosuzu who lives in the human village. While the series spends quite a bit of time on Kosuzu being a silly little gremlin, I would say that this series is important specifically because it explains the role of the human village within Gensokyo and the power dynamic between humans and yokai. I would say that if you wanted to start with a manga series, this is the one to read. The remaining manga, Lotus Eaters and Foul Detective Satori, are currently still ongoing, so I'll refrain from speaking on them. But before I get into the super lore-dense books, I'll mention a few miscellaneous pieces. Within the Touhou Fan book Seasonal Dream Vision, there is an official short story written by Zune called A Beautiful Flower Blooming Violet Every 60 Years. I would recommend reading this after understanding the plot of Touhou 9. Likewise, the previously mentioned Eastern and Little Nature deity from Touhou Sangetsusei has additional written data and a short story titled Fairy of the Moon. There are even 2 books that talk about the spell cards of different characters. Each character has some of their spell cards analyzed and rated by other in-world characters. These books are the Grimoire of Marissa and the Grimoire of Usami. The latter also has a neat little manga to give more context to it. I wouldn't consider these high priority, but they're nice little reads. Next we have the Touhou Bunka series. This is currently comprised of 2 books, Bohemian Archive in Japanese Red and Alternative Facts in Eastern Utopia. These books both take the form of an in-universe compilation of newspaper articles, essays, and interviews done mostly by the Tengu Shame Maru Aya. Both of these are quite text-heavy, but also contain lots of interesting information about different characters in Gensokyo. While I would probably not start with either of these, if you are someone who enjoys reading, these are both a lot of fun. Bohemian Archive covers characters from Touhou 6 through 9, while Alternative Facts covers 6 through 15. I'll also mention Bohemian Archive contains a short official comic called Extra of the Wind. And finally, we have Touhou Gumon. This is currently 2 books, Perfect Memento in Strict Sense and Alternative Facts in Eastern Utopia. Perfect Memento in Strict Sense is what I would consider the most fundamental written work in the series as a whole. This work is written from the in-universe perspective of Hieda no Q and goes over different characters, races, locations, and even events from Gensokyo's history. The latter, Symposium of Post-Mysticism, is partly an extension to that, but also contains a discussion between the then newly arrived faction leaders within Gensokyo. Both are very interesting reads, with Perfect Memento being what I would consider one of the best starting points for getting into the canon. Symposium might be best to read after understanding the plot of Touhou 6 through 13. Now, I say that this is the end of the canon works, but technically that's not true. There are also many translated interviews Zune has given over the years that contain information as well. And as stated prior, anything Zune says about the series can be considered Word of God. If you happen to be looking for more content, there's also Strange Creators of Outer World, which is an official magazine that talks about the series and is described as being newbie friendly. And that concludes our list of all canon sources. For ease of access, here's the list of all my recommended starting points. For the games in specific, I think arguments could be made for many others, but I wish to keep this video simple. Instead, I would invite some discussion for fans who have played the official games to give their opinions in the comments. I will also say that if you are able, to see about purchasing official works. I've included the wiki's purchase guide in the description for that purpose. But that concludes my quick guide to the Touhou canon. As always, if you have questions, leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. Thanks for watching.